This was the moment a jewelry store was wiped out in just 30 seconds. In 2025 in Fremont, California, nearly 24 thieves stormed into Kumar Jewelers at once, armed with hammers and tools. Within seconds, they began smashing display cases and sweeping jewelry into bags as employees were forced to stand back. By the time it was over, $1.7 million worth of jewelry, about 80% of the store's inventory, was wiped out in just over a minute. The group dispersed in multiple getaway cars and several arrests were later made, but most of the crew remains unidentified and the majority of the stolen jewelry has never been found. In New York City, Darius McCollum developed an obsessive fixation on the transit system that led him to repeatedly impersonate MTA employees and take control of buses and subway trains. Beginning as a teenager, he was arrested more than 30 times after entering restricted areas, operating vehicles, and running full routes while delivering accurate announcements and staying on schedule. He wasn't stealing the vehicles or trying to escape, he was operating the job with precision. Each incident still carried real risk, and over time the pattern didn't stop. He continued being arrested well into adulthood, spending years cycling through jail and psychiatric evaluations. Despite national attention and a 2016 documentary about his case, there was still no long-term solution put in place, as he remained stuck between the transit system he was obsessed with and a justice system that had no idea how to effectively handle the situation. Here's an image showing what the sinking of the Titanic would have actually looked like on April 15, 1912. It was a moonless night in the North Atlantic, and once the ship's power failed, the massive liner disappeared into near total darkness, leaving over 1,500 people unable to clearly see the ship, the lifeboats, or even each other. Many survivors later reported hearing screams from the water but couldn't see anything, as the lack of light turned the disaster into something disorienting and almost invisible. It wasn't just the freezing temperatures that made it so horrifying, it was also the darkness, where one of the worst disasters in maritime history unfolded out of sight. In 1922, a young girl with severe diabetes was photographed while essentially waiting to die, at a time when the condition was almost always fatal, especially in children. Before there was any treatment, patients were often placed on near-starvation diets to slow the disease, leaving them dangerously weak while their bodies continued to deteriorate. That same year, doctors administered a new experimental treatment called insulin, one of the first times it had ever been used on a human. Within days, patients who were expected to die began to recover. The discovery transformed diabetes from a death sentence into a manageable condition almost overnight. According to serial killer Danny Rolling, here's a list of things you can do to avoid being murdered by a serial killer. Park your car in the light. Buy yourself a .38 caliber revolver. Get a permit to carry it on your person and keep it in your handbag where it's easy to get to. Buy some mace on a keychain and have it ready when you get out of your car. If your bedroom window doesn't have a screen, get one and nail it to the windowsill. Place a bunch of empty glass bottles in the windows. Get you some curtains. Buy a deadbolt and put it on your bedroom door so you can lock yourself in. Sleep with your .38 caliber revolver under your pillow. It won't go off by accident. If someone bothers you, don't ever let an attacker get control. Fight for your life. Scream as loud as you can. Spray mace in his face. Kick him in the balls. Scratch at his eyes. Pull out your .38 caliber and blow him away. Danny Rolling, also known as the Gainesville Ripper, murdered 5 college students in Florida in 1990, breaking into their apartments at night and targeting them while they were alone. He was later captured, sentenced to death, and executed by lethal injection in 2006. Just yesterday, on April 19, 2026, in Shreveport, Louisiana, 31-year-old Army National Guard veteran Shamar Elkins killed 8 children, 7 of them his own, after a domestic dispute with his wife, who he was in the process of separating from. Just hours before the attack, he'd been posting photos online, including one about spending time with his daughter, and nothing about it suggested anything was wrong or that something horrific was about to happen. Early that morning, he shot his wife first, who survived, and then went to another home where the children were and killed all 8 of them. Several were shot while asleep in their beds, and at least one child tried to escape but was still killed. The victims ranged from very young children to preteens. In the time leading up to it, family members said he'd been dealing with mental health struggles and what they described as dark thoughts. He also had a prior firearm-related arrest in 2019, but no clear single motive has been confirmed beyond the domestic situation escalating. Afterward, he fled the scene, carjacked a vehicle, and led police on a chase before being shot and killed by 2 officers. 2 adults survived the shooting with critical injuries, and the killings became one of the deadliest mass shootings involving children in recent U.S. history. In 1995, 15-year-old Elise Poller was lured to a remote eucalyptus grove in California by 3 teenage boys she knew from school. But what began as a planned meetup quickly turned into a brutal attack. Elise was stabbed multiple times and strangled, and her body was hidden in dense brush where it remained undiscovered for months. The case finally unraveled when one of the teens confessed to his youth pastor, who contacted authorities and led investigators to her remains. During questioning, the boys told police the killing was part of a satanic ritual that would help their struggling death metal band gain success. They specifically claimed they needed to sacrifice a virgin, a detail that shocked the community and drew national attention to the case. All three were convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to decades in prison. In recent years, 2 of the men have been granted parole while the other remains in prison, a decision that's reopened old wounds in the community nearly 3 decades later. This is what it looks like when a shepherd is displaced by war. The footage shows hundreds of goats and sheep moving through the streets of Beirut behind a man who had fled Israeli strikes in Lebanon near Naqoura. He reportedly walked for days to reach the city and brought his entire herd with him instead of leaving them behind. In rural Lebanon, a single goat or sheep can be worth up to $300, meaning a herd this size can represent tens of thousands of dollars in a person's entire livelihood. Here's a ridiculously amazing video of lightning striking a firework. Commenters across the internet said it was God's way of telling the fireworkers to keep the noise down. This is what it looks like to win at pinball. Here's a clip of a Picasso bug, Africa's living masterpiece. Native to sub-Saharan Africa, this tiny insect is only about a centimeter long, but its shell is covered in striking geometric patterns of red, blue, yellow, and black. Those vivid colors do serve a purpose, warning predators that it tastes terrible. As a teenager, Euphoria star Angus Cloud survived a life-threatening head injury after falling into a construction site, fracturing his skull and requiring emergency brain surgery, leaving a long scar along his head. He was later discovered on the street with no prior acting experience and cast in Euphoria, where he became known for playing a drug dealer. But in July of 2023 in Oakland, the 25-year-old died from an accidental overdose, including fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, and benzodiazepines, a lethal combination that can quickly lead to respiratory failure. His death came just days after burying his father, who died from cancer, and he had returned to the home where his father passed, reportedly struggling with grief and mental health in the days leading up to his death. Eerily, he previously said he wanted to portray Mac Miller in a biopic, who died in 2018 from a similar fentanyl-related overdose. In 2018 in California, 23-year-old Angela Hernandez drove off a cliff along Highway 1, plunging about 200 feet into the ocean below. The impact left her with a brain hemorrhage, broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and broken collarbones. After regaining consciousness inside the submerged vehicle, she managed to escape before it sank, swim to shore, and climb onto a narrow rocky ledge beneath the cliff. With no supplies and severely injured, she survived for 7 days by drinking fresh water that dripped down from moss and vegetation on the rock face. She was eventually spotted by passing hikers along the roadway, who alerted authorities, leading to her rescue and evacuation to a hospital. During the 2020 COVID-19 lockdown in New Hampshire, a family was forced to say goodbye to their dying father through a window, as nurses in full protective gear stood inside his room. Unable to be with him in his final moments due to strict isolation rules, the nurses held up handwritten signs reading, "He is at peace and we are so sorry," showing how the pandemic separated families even at the most dire moments. In August of 1994 in Oakville, Washington, residents reported a translucent, gelatinous substance falling from the sky during multiple rainstorms over several weeks, coating cars, roads, and buildings. Many locals claim they developed flu-like symptoms afterward, and samples of the material were sent for laboratory testing, though results were inconsistent and never confirmed a clear origin. Various explanations were proposed, including atmospheric phenomena and waste from passing aircraft, but none were definitively proven, and the incident remains unexplained. In 2004, the British reality show There's Something About Miriam flew 6 men to Ibiza to compete for £10,000 in the affection of 21-year-old Mexican model Miriam Rivera. Throughout filming, the contestants were never told that Miriam was transgender. In the finale, after one man was chosen as the winner, Miriam revealed the truth on camera. The reaction was immediate. Several contestants later sued the production company, claiming emotional distress and deception. The case was ultimately settled out of court for an undisclosed amount, reportedly around £500,000 split among the contestants. Years later, in 2019, Miriam Rivera was found dead inside an apartment in Mexico at age 38. The death was officially ruled a suicide, though some of Miriam's family disputed the conclusion and believed there may have been other much darker circumstances surrounding it. Seattle artist Sunday Nobody spent $25,000 creating a bronze statue, combining the ancient Greek Discobolus with the face of handsome Squidward. He consulted archaeologists to ensure it could withstand long-term underwater conditions, then deliberately sank it about 9 meters deep in the Mediterranean Sea, so it could potentially be discovered in the future as a convincing artifact. This executioner's sword from the late 17th century Germany was engraved with the words, "When I raise this sword, so I wish that this poor sinner will receive eternal life." The Creel Mound in what is now West Virginia, built around 250 BC by the Adena culture, contained a central burial surrounded by multiple skeletons arranged in a circle, with their feet pointed toward the body in the middle. Archaeologists believe the positioning suggests a ritual burial, possibly involving individuals placed around a high-status figure, though the exact circumstances remain unclear. The Celtic carnix was an ancient war horn used by Celtic tribes between 300 BC and 200 AD. It was a long, vertical bronze instrument, often shaped with an animal head at the top, designed to project intimidating sounds across the battlefield. Moments before combat, its eerie, haunting blasts would echo through the air, one of the last sounds Roman soldiers heard before facing their enemies. A 34-year-old orangutan at the Metro Richmond Zoo in Virginia named Patrick was given a royal cloak for his birthday, and without any training, he tied it around himself like a wearable outfit. Orangutans are already known for advanced problem-solving and tool use, but moments like this show just how far that intelligence can go. Instead of playing with it, Patrick used the fabric with a clear purpose. It's a small moment, but it highlights the level of cognitive ability orangutans are capable of. This orb weaver spider had nowhere to attach the bottom of its web, so it made its own anchor. With no stable point to build from, it picked up a small rock and used it to hold the entire structure together. Orb weavers are known for their precise, almost mechanical construction, but this goes beyond instinct. It shows they can adjust their strategy when conditions change, solving problems in real time. In this case, the spider effectively created a solution to the missing piece of its environment, creatively allowing it to hunt in a place it otherwise couldn't have. Why is he doing that, though? Here's an incredible video of a mother deer in someone's yard with not one but 2 albino fawns beside her. Albino deer are extremely rare, estimated to occur in roughly 1 out of every 20,000 births. Seeing 2 at once is even rarer, but it likely means the fawns are twins, sharing the same genetic mutation that prevents their bodies from producing any pigment. The condition gives them their ghost white fur and pink eyes, but it also makes survival in the wild much harder, since their lack of camouflage and vision problems make them easier targets for predators. Because of this, many albino deer unfortunately don't live very long in the wild. After traveling for 9 years and covering more than 3 billion miles, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft finally reached Pluto in 2015. When it flew past the distant dwarf planet, it captured this video revealing something no one expected. Massive icy mountains rising thousands of feet above Pluto's surface. Made of frozen water as hard as rock, some of these peaks rise more than 11,000 feet high. And because Pluto's so small, you can actually see the planet's curvature right behind them, making the mountains look enormous against the horizon. In Miami Gardens, Florida in 2011, O'Neal Ron Morris was arrested after performing unlicensed cosmetic injections using dangerous homemade mixtures that included substances like cement, oil, and sealants. Victims sought cheap body enhancements, but instead suffered severe complications, infections, and permanent disfigurement. In 2012, one of Morris's clients died after being injected, escalating the case to homicide. Morris was eventually sentenced to 10 years in prison for manslaughter and for practicing medicine without a license. On July 1st, 2016, in Louisville, Kentucky, 21-year-old Joshua Woodruff was struck by a black sedan while waiting for an Uber after celebrating New Year's. Instead of stopping, the driver kept going, dragging Woodruff's body beneath the car for nearly 6 miles along the highway. By the time he was finally dislodged onto the roadway, he'd suffered catastrophic, unrecognizable injuries from being ground against the pavement at high speeds. The driver never came forward, and despite years of investigation, no one has been held accountable. Woodruff's grieving family has continued searching for answers, left with the haunting reality that someone drove for miles knowing exactly what they were doing and chose to keep going. This clip from a 1995 talk show would later become key evidence in a murder case.
Let's have John come out here and see who has the crush on him. Here's John. Did you think Donna had the crush on you?
Did I? No, we're good friends.
Well, guess what? It's Scott that has the crush on you.
You lied to me.
1995, 32-year-old Scott Amador appeared on The Jenny Jones Show to reveal a secret crush on his longtime friend Jonathan Schmitz. Before the taping, producers had reportedly told Schmitz that a woman had a crush on him, not that the admirer would actually be his male friend. When the truth was revealed on stage, Schmitz appeared to take the surprise in stride and even laughed it off in front of the studio audience. But after the episode was recorded, he apparently became deeply embarrassed by the public revelation. Just 3 days later in Michigan, Schmitz bought a shotgun, drove to Amador's home, and shot him twice in the chest, killing him instantly. He then called 911 and confessed to the shooting. Schmitz was later convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to 25 to 50 years in prison, eventually being released on parole in 2017. The killing, which became known as the Jenny Jones murder, sparked a nationwide debate about the ethics of 1990s ambush-style talk shows and the use of the so-called gay panic defense in court. In 2012, Harold Henthorne claimed that his wife Toni had died in a hiking accident after falling 140 feet off a cliff in Rocky Mountain National Park. On the day of their 12th wedding anniversary, Harold insisted on a strenuous hike up Deer Mountain despite Toni's bad knee and limited hiking experience. After her fall, he gave investigators multiple conflicting accounts, repeatedly changing what he said he was doing at the moment she fell over the edge. Investigators later found a map in his car with the exact location of her death marked with an X, and uncovered that his spouse before Toni had also died years earlier under mysterious circumstances. Toni's death closely resembled the 1995 death of Lynn Henthorne, who was crushed beneath a Jeep on a remote Colorado road when it supposedly slipped off a jack. Harold claimed both deaths were merely accidents, but prosecutors argued the similarities were far too extreme to be considered coincidence. In 2015, he was convicted of murdering Toni Henthorne and sentenced to life in prison. In 2017, 22-year-old YouTuber Pedro Ruiz III tried to film a stunt where a hardcover encyclopedia would stop a .50 caliber round from a Desert Eagle. He had already tested the trick once before with a smaller gun, giving him the confidence to try it again, this time asking his pregnant girlfriend Mona Lisa Perez to fire from just a foot away. But the .50 cal round tore straight through the encyclopedia and into his chest, killing him instantly as 2 cameras recorded the stunt and their 3-year-old daughter stood nearby. Family members later said they'd warned him these viral stunts would get him killed. Perez pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 180 days in jail, and their unborn son was later named after Pedro. In Tampa, Florida, a long-lost cemetery quietly vanished from records for nearly a century, until a local newspaper traced old land deeds and realized a public housing complex had been built directly on top of it. When archaeologists scanned the ground with radar, they found over 100 graves still buried under the apartment complex in perfectly neat rows. The housing authority later confirmed they wouldn't disturb the bodies. Instead, they began relocating residents and announced plans to turn the land into a memorial park for the forgotten dead. Donald Glover has revealed that he secretly suffered a stroke while on tour in 2024, collapsing with severe head pain and blurred vision before doctors in Houston told him what had happened. Medical scans then uncovered something even more horrifying, a hidden hole in his heart that required multiple surgeries, while he was also dealing with a broken foot and crushing exhaustion. The combination led to a cascade of health failures that didn't just threaten his tour, they nearly killed him. After months of treatment and recovery, Glover says he's stable now and finally healthy again. In 2002, 21-year-old Angela Walker and her brother attacked 32-year-old Canadian tourist Derek Rogers on a beach in Maine, reportedly knocking him unconscious and stuffing sand into his airways until he suffocated. Walker later lied to police about what had happened, before pleading guilty to manslaughter and perjury and receiving 10 years in prison. More than 2 decades later, in 2025, she was elected to the Bangor City Council, an outcome that drew outrage from the Rogers family and revived public attention towards the brutal killing. This was the photo that gave police hope they might find James Bulger alive, but instead, it became one of the most haunting crime photos ever taken. In February of 1993, 2-year-old James Bulger disappeared. In the 2 seconds his mother let go of his hand in a Liverpool shopping center, and police initially felt relieved when security footage showed him leaving with 2 young boys, not an adult predator, but that relief quickly diminished as they slowly learned the horrific truth. Over the next 2 hours, 10-year-olds John Venables and Robert Thompson dragged James through back streets, kicked and punched him, threw him onto his head, smeared paint in his eye, force-fed him batteries, pelted him with bricks and stones, and beat him with a 22-pound iron bar. At one point, they tried to push him into traffic, and several witnesses later admitted they didn't intervene because they assumed James was their younger brother. Their assaults left 42 separate injuries, including multiple skull fractures so extensive pathologists couldn't determine how or when James died. The boys then placed his body across train tracks to stage an accident, and a train later severed him, destroying critical evidence and delaying the discovery of the truth. When police identified the killers, expecting a violent man, not 2 10-year-olds, veteran officers said it was the most disturbing revelation of their careers. Both were sentenced to detention and released at 18 with lifelong anonymity, but Venables has since returned to prison multiple times for child abuse material, while Thompson has not reoffended, though he spent years blaming James's mother for the horrific murder, saying she never should have let go of his hand. In 2023, British TV presenter Holly Willoughby narrowly escaped a fate straight out of a nightmare. Her stalker, 36-year-old security guard Gavin Plum, had been secretly building what prosecutors called a murder kit in his Essex home. Ropes, metal cable ties, chloroform, and knives, all carefully organized for a late-night abduction. He spent over 18 months plotting every step, obsessively saving thousands of images of Willoughby, including hundreds of deepfakes he made to fuel his fantasies. Plum shared his entire plan with someone he met on a dark chat room called Abduct Lovers, where over 100 members spent hours trading violent fantasies. He even sent voice memos describing how they'd hit at night when traffic was low, and how he'd chloroform both of them, referring to Willoughby and her husband. But what he didn't know was that his online partner wasn't a killer, he was an undercover US federal agent. When British police stormed Plum's apartment, they found his computer filled with explicit material, detailed kidnap instructions, and surveillance notes about Willoughby's security routines. He knew her full schedule and had even written down what time she usually woke up. In July of 2024, Plum was sentenced to life in prison with at least 16 years before parole. In one of the most evil cases of betrayal ever recorded, a man from New Zealand secretly infected his wife with HIV using a sewing needle dipped in his own blood. After cheating on her and being diagnosed himself, he feared she would leave him. So while she slept, he pricked her leg, leaving only a tiny sting and a red mark. Months later, during a routine checkup, she tested positive for the virus and confronted him. He chillingly confessed, saying he only did it so she would be the same as me and would never leave. Prosecutors later called it an act of pure cruelty, and the man was sentenced to prison for willfully injecting another with a disease, a charge so rare that even the judge called it almost without precedent.